Kenya to Colombia, from Iraq to Korea, in slums, in schools, in prisons, and in theaters. Every day, people gather at TEDx events around the world to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. Today, you are part of a global conversation about our shared future. So what is this TEDx? TEDx is an initiative of the TED Conference, a nonprofit devoted to ideas worth spreading. We grant free licenses to allow TED-like events to spread globally. This event today is based on the TED Conference format and ideals, but is independently organized by your local community. So please make sure to thank the team of volunteers who worked so hard on today's event. It's their ideas, dedication, and time that made it all possible. It's they who booked all the speakers, and the views you'll hear today are, of course, those of those speakers, not necessarily of TEDs. But we hope their talks spark an exciting conversation among you. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for openness and for critical thinking, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you'll take out. And now, on with the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to TEDx Glasshouse Christian College, here in the iconic Glasshouse Mountains region of the Sunshine Coast, a place of tremendous beauty, a place where the ocean meets stretches of sun-soaked beaches, morphing into the rainforests of the hinterland, and where, offshore, whales frolic in the warm waters amongst idyllic islands. The indigenous Gubbi Gubbi peoples of this region believed that these Glasshouse Mountains were connected as a family of mountain spirits caught by a tsunami as they went fishing. Now they are forever connected to the landscape. Tibrigagan longingly peers out to the oceans he will never fish again, and Biwa longs for the mountains she will never visit again. As islands are connected by the moving, restless waters of the ocean flowing between and around them, so each person is connected to another through the oceans of our shared ancestry. Connection is deeply written into the DNA of life. From the smallest cell to the largest creature that ever lived, each one is connected to others through physical structures or unseen bonds that create unity. The connection between man and nature has been shaped through the ages. It has flowed in and around to bring us to this place and time. Looking back, it has formed our legends and the ways we interact with the environment and each other. Not only has nature shaped us, but as this flow continues, it changes us, and we change in our connections, developing new and exciting ways to connect. In recent years, the rapid growth of technology, population, and mobility has enhanced this connectedness more than ever. Yet somehow we now seem more empty and isolated. We sense that we are losing something of the deeper connections of our ancestors. We long for the connections of the past. Our deepest yearning to be richly and authentically connected can only be fulfilled as we pause to look beyond the obvious of the day-to-day, to consider that which succeeds and that which can be. Join us as we explore how we can be more richly connected.
Good afternoon, staff, students, and guests. Welcome to TEDx Glasshouse Christian College. My name is Jordan Bull, and we believe the insights shared today will enrich your lives and encourage you to look into your own future to create a better world and a better life for all. However, before we begin, there are a few housekeeping matters I would like to make you aware of. Firstly, we are recording and live streaming the footage of today online, and the talks will be available on the official TEDx YouTube channel within a few weeks. secondly, please turn off all mobile and light-emitting devices that could interfere with the quality of the filming. Please remain seated during the talks, as the movement of audience members during the talks would prevent us from getting a usable recording. Toilet facilities are located just outside the theatre door to the right. In the unlikely event of an evacuation, you can follow the directions of staff members up to the oval through the 2 side doors. Unfortunately, there's been an accident on the highway today, so we will have guests arriving in between talks. And lastly, please join us for some refreshments during our intermission in the foyer area just outside. The moment has arrived to welcome our first speaker for the day. Rob Maguire is the Year 12 Coordinator and Senior Teacher at Glasshouse Christian College. He has a passion for enriching students' lives, and he seeks to challenge and inspire students and staff to go beyond their current paradigms of what good connections look like. Please join me in welcoming him to the TEDx stage.
Good afternoon, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for coming out this evening to TEDx Glasshouse. Thank you to the organisers of the event, Bert, wherever you are. Most importantly, for putting me on first. I think I might have been struck dumb with intimidation had I spoken any later. Amazing guests. Thank you guys for coming and speaking and sharing with us today. Really looking forward to the evening. Last of all, and most important of all, I want to thank the Lord for this beautiful place, for my place in it, and really just for the set of circumstances that bring me to this red carpet here today. It was only him and his work in my life that gets me here. I need to start, I suppose, with a couple of confessions. The first one being I'm a high school teacher, as you just kind of heard, which means I have a moderate caffeine addiction. I have the best job in the world, in a very narrow psychological sense, and that I tend to spend most of my time hanging around with other people who spend a lot of time hanging around with teenagers. So my vocabulary may not be as clever as some. But the second confession I need to make is probably the big one. I work in the English Humanities department, which means that I love words. And if there's something that really has fascinated me about today and still about my job and about young people in general, which are the things that pull me together, it's words. I want to, if you will, now apologies to any students in the audience, I've done this with every English class I've had as far as I know at the start of every subject, usually around the time of kind of why Shakespeare, sir, or something like that. But I wonder if you'll indulge me for a moment in a little bit of interaction. I want you to do something. I want to challenge you to do something. Close your eyes if you need to. I want you to engage your imagination, engage your creativity at every level that you have. And I want you to imagine something. Anything. A colour, a place, an invention, a person, a concept that you cannot describe with words. Go now. I'll give you some time. Not a lot of time. I'm on the timer and I'm notoriously bad with time, so you can have a few seconds. Come on, get it going. Be creative, be creative. Use it, hold the space, close your eyes, stand up if you need to. Anything that you cannot describe with words. If you got it, there it is. Hold it there, hold it there. Fantastic. Done. My exercise is finished. My talk's over. Thank you very much. No. What I defiantly say to you is that I just set you an impossible task. That words are incredibly important. They're not just the way we communicate, they're the way that we think. I don't actually believe you can learn anything, personally, until you've attached it to a word and filed it away. I want you to think about words like the filing cabinet of your mind. That's what makes my job exciting. That's what makes it such a privilege to be kind of in that space where I'm introducing words to young people in all of their different contexts. Now, I know there's always some in the class, and I'm sure there's some in this audience who are sitting there going, nah, man, I got this. I thought of something. It's here. It's still here. Defy you to say otherwise. Well, I say to you that's fine, because you've still proven my point. If you really did, in all of that creative space inside of your mind, manage to grab a hold of something that you can't describe with words, it's useless to you and it's useless to me, because you can't share it with the world. So either way, words are incredibly important. Now, I tell you a challenge for me, and I want to get to the little tiny way, and I say little tiny because I've got a little tiny space of the world that I'm trying to change. They come to me in groups of about 25 or so in 40-minute blocks. I want to introduce you to a couple of words that I think are important in my space right now. They may not be the big words, but they are. But words are incredibly important. There's little ones and big ones. There's descriptive ones and conceptual ones. They come in and out of favour. There's cuss words. There's cuss words that used to be cuss words, and then there's cuss words that are now becoming cuss words, and there's all sorts of words in between. And the information age, the time that we live in right now for our young people, the time of the pocket world, if you're wondering what pocket world refers to, put it in the wrong pocket, funnily enough, refers to this. The information age, the age where our young people engage more with this little screen on some days than they do with adult intellectual conversation, than they do with their own families at times, than they do with good old books, other sorts of concepts that excite me. The pocket world, the information age, has exposed young people to infinitesimally, I don't even know if that is a word, more words, more concepts. They've overflowed their filing cabinet with ideas. And it's at the same time eroded away on the voices that would give them context. Now, I'm like probably a few of you, I can't see much because the lights are bright in this direction, but I'm like a few of you in the audience, I'm sure, of the Generation X vintage. I still remember with wistful fondness, gather the grandkiddies, don't have any grandkids, but you know what I mean, I'm being metaphorical, gather the kiddies around and say, I remember the days before the big bad interwebs. I remember when big words and explanations came at me from people of authority that it was safe to believe. My parents, teachers, leaders, that guy in the suit that reads the news, you know the one I'm talking about. I got a story. I got to tell you a story. I love stories. This is probably where I'll blow my time, but that's so be it. I did work experience in year 10 at Win Television in Wollongong. And there's a guy there used to read the news, and I scored myself a gig one afternoon in the camera room in the studio where they were recording the 6 o'clock news on Win Television. And he came in. Now, in the best possible kind of 80s way, he had really nicely done hair with the gel. Shirt was immaculate, big wide tie, perfect knot, great suit jacket at least, but he was wearing jeans and sand shoes. Destroyed my world. Something broke inside of me at that moment. He sat down behind the news desk, and when the cameras rolled, he looked, for all intents and purposes, like the perfect authority figure. But I knew that he was just wearing ripped jeans even and sand shoes underneath all of that. Any of you remember Graham Kennedy? He totally destroyed that idea for the rest of us, if you're old enough for that vintage later on, but that's another TED talk. But I know that authority figure, I know that there was this kind of picture in my childhood. There was a safety with the words that were explained to me and the way that I swallowed them. That does not exist anymore. I did a little, I'm missing my clicker, I'm sorry. If someone could find me the clicker, that'd be fantastic. I did a little, in my own pocket, did a little word association game just to kind of make my point. Went with a couple of the big trending topics, big global trending topics. Words matter, yes they do. Donald Trump. Not that interested in American politics, to be honest, but it appears the world is. This was an article about the cover photo of an article, the content of which I still, after reading this article, don't know. Apparently, New Yorker depicts Trump as a dangerous clown. However, the same man, through the same pocket world, vanquished the New World Order, according to that article, with a handshake and a soundbite. I didn't know they were that easy to defeat. You'd think they would have done that before. Upon reading that article, that was actually an article about a handshake and the possible ramifications of 3 words that were spoken at the time. I went to climate change. Billions of dollars in losses. Climate change is a big deal, don't get me wrong. I'm not making light of these topics, but I'm trying to find answers in the pocket world. And I'm finding a lot of words and a lot of big concepts and not a lot of substance. Climate change is already costing the US billions. Or it is the biggest scientific fraud ever perpetrated. Same phone, same world. I love the little colon scientist. It was definitely a scientist that said it. We have it on record. And finally, the one most tragic of all, I don't know whether you guys ever participated in this, but man, Qui-Gon Jinn got stabbed in my favourite movie, sorry I'm digressing, and then he died on October 28, 2017. Liam Neeson. Reports are that it was a hoax, that he's still alive. Now, I'm not really sure because I've never met Liam Neeson in person, but apparently he didn't die. The information age is crazy. Okay, and it is getting harder and harder for our students, for our young people, for your kids to know things in that space, particularly through their pocket world. So what I want to do is talk to you about a couple of simple words. They're not necessarily big words, but they're two words that I find important in my little space, in hopefully doing something to teach our young people to negotiate their life, their identity, who they are and what they know in this pocket world. Inquiry. I'm not talking about the please may I help you kind. I'm talking about a fairly specific, educationally focused definition of inquiry. Now, it's not a new word and it's not even a new educational concept, but it has very new and valid application in today's world. It is a tool, if you like. In EduSpeak, it is a whole bunch of things. It is student-focused learning. It is differentiated pedagogy, focused curiosity. It's a buzzword in education at the moment, but I think of it just like the GPS for the information age. I think of it like teaching students how to ask the right question and then find the right answer. Done properly, and I'm not even standing up here as an expert saying that I can do it properly yet, but I intend to get as good at it as I can. It's focused curiosity. And that's about all I really want to say on the matter. Hoping some of you feel a little ripped off by that. I mean, did we charge for tickets? I'm not sure how it even worked here to get to TEDx, but surely this teacher, I mean, I've been doing this for a little while, he would have more to say on such an important educational buzzword as inquiry, but you know what? I don't have to be the expert in the new paradigm. I'm hoping that some of you feel a little dissatisfied right now with my explanation. I'm hoping some of you might even dare to do a little searching yourself. You're all perfect candidates right now for your own inquiry and your own learning journey, and that's really what it's about. Talk about another word. Moving along. My second one, representation. I'm listening to the collective groan from the senior students in the room. This is a word that appears probably more often than any other word in the actual texts and the actual curriculum documents, in the actual planning and the actual stuff that goes on in my classroom. This word inundates us. And if the inquiry is the GPS for the information age, this one, I dare say, is the vaccine for the algorithm. And I'll get to that in a moment. You see, everything would be sweet and fine if two things would just happen. If kids, first of all, would just listen to the people that know them about who they are. If that could be done, well, if I could make that into a pill and sell it, we wouldn't need half of what we do in school, and we could all go home early. But no. Young people, old people, every person finds themselves reflected back in this pocket world. And secondly, the internet just won't sit still. If it would just be the filing cabinet that it's designed to be, where we could just put the world in nice ordered places and everybody could just go exactly where they need to find exactly what they want, everything would be perfect. And we could just stand there and put it in the corner. We could have a computer lab set up, and when you need to know something, you just go and click on the right thing and find the right information from authoritative sources, and now you know something, and congratulations, you've been educated. But it doesn't work like that. See, what the internet's doing is constantly collecting everything it can about your affiliations, religious, political, sporting, about your habits, spending, travelling, viewing, about your networks, about your contacts, about your inbox. And it's doing this to sell you things. It's doing this to make $1. And it will actually tailor your internet experience to maximise the effect and impact of that marketplace. So the rub is that my pocket world is not the same as any of yours. In fact, it's not really the world at all. It's a representation, if you dare, of the world. Spent over and over and over again. Man, in senior English, if I preach it for a second. We talk about this. We talk about representations of race and gender and love and beauty and religion and everything we can think of, to be perfectly honest. I've sat in meetings where we've gone, we're going to run some electives this term. Well, how many different representations can we offer these students to look at? We are fascinated by the concept because there's a literacy here that's incredibly important. I'll tell you, I honestly, I don't know how many Star Wars memes and gaming videos I had to look at on my Facebook feed to repair it from a quick search about Donald Trump and climate change. It changed the face of my pocket world dramatically. Still has, I believe. Not going to go in there yet, I don't like it. But you know, I can laugh about Putin and I can laugh about Trump and I can laugh about Liam Neeson because I'm Generation X. I have a skepticism that's born of perspective. The generation that I'm educating does not have any such perspective. They've been born into it. And so this literacy, I believe, is incredibly important. We ask pretty much 3 simple questions as often as we can. What is it that you're actually seeing here? What's the idea below? What's the ideology driving? What's the worldview represented here? How is it constructed? Ever so important. Firstly, so you can identify it when it's coming at you sideways and you don't recognise the genre. And secondly, so you can partake in it yourself and change the world when you need to. And thirdly, why? Why are they doing it? Why do you care? I often get a sad response to that third question, so I try not to ask it as often as some. But truthfully, that's the one. And that's about where I want to leave this tonight. I think that the concept of inquiry, I think that the idea of a learning journey that's student-driven, and I think the literacy of the world of representation, whether it's profile lists or porn clips, whether it's likes lists, whether it's advertising images, whether it's your inbox, your contact list, whether it's your Friday night reading or what you look at on YouTube. I think that there's a world out there that needs to be presented and represented the right way. And I think that I'm trying to use these 2 concepts to change the world. Thanks for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Maguire. What a passionate man. You've given us so much to think about. Our second speaker for the night is Dr. Daniel Pampook. He was appointed Chief Executive Officer of Christian Schools Australia in January 2017. He was previously the Executive Officer of the Uniting Church Schools Commission, overseeing 18 institutions in Queensland. Daniel has 20 years of experience in Christian education and most recently served as the Executive Principal of the Crest Group of Christian Schools and Early Learning Centres. Daniel has a PhD in Next Generation Leadership as well as Masters in both Business and Educational Leadership. Daniel is currently completing a Master's in Theology. In 2014, Daniel was awarded the Mayoral Certificate for Contribution to Education in the City of Casey, the Federal Government Award for Outstanding Service in Education, as well as the CSA Award for Outstanding Service to a Christian Education in Australia. Daniel has served on a range of state and national education boards and committees. Please welcome Dr. Pampook to the TEDx stage.
Good afternoon, it's really good to be here with you. And I like the topic of connection. And coming from an education background, as you heard, my fascination is around how we connect with each other, particularly students with each other, and what impact that has in a school environment in terms of students' sense of well-being, and then furthermore, does that impact upon their achievement? We're in a society now, particularly in Australia, where we focus a lot on results. We see that students at NAPLAN results, and a lot of our students are completing their final years of education as well, and it all comes down to a particular number. And somehow we can be confused to think that that one number or that score is the value of who we are as individuals, the value of what we will contribute to society in the future. So I want to talk about connection today with regard to the idea of relationship and the power of relationship between individuals, communities, and the individuals in them. Let me start by asking you a question to reflect on. Do you think it's important that students are happy, well-adjusted, connected to their schools? Is it important that a student wants to go to school in the morning. And I would say to you that it is really important, and the studies are starting to show that a student who feels that they're going to school, which is a community of people who likes them, who accepts them, who values them, go to that school more regularly. They go to that school with a better sense of self, that their ideas and their values about where they will end up in the future are much higher. And finally, that their results are far better, because the way that they see themselves, the way that they feel that others see them, is so critically important that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy in that young person's life. This type of research is now coming to the fore, and a group that I really like and I recommend is the group called the Relational Schools Foundation. Since 2014, Dr. Rob Lowe has been looking at the impact of relationship on young people. He has gone through all of the UK doing surveys and interviews of young people to say and to look at how do they feel versus how they see themselves or achieve as individuals. He found 5 different components in terms of how a young person views themselves or how a school is set up. And his research shows that there are 5 elements of a school that will help them to improve the sense of well-being for an individual and develop community. The first one is around power. And in a sense is that for young people and for schools to thrive and be good places to belong, is that power something that is distributed fairly? As an individual, is power distributed in a sense where I feel respected and I can respect others? The second one there is around the information. When I'm in this school environment, do I feel I receive the information, the feedback that I require to be successful in that community? The third element is communication. Are there times where I can communicate to speak to others and times where I can be heard as well? And does the school value that? Do my classes, do my colleagues value that ability to be able to communicate with each other? The fourth element is around purpose. Why are we here? What are we doing together? What is the direction that we're headed? Is there a synergy in the types of things that we're doing together that we're actually building towards the same destination? And finally, when I reflect back on my story and I look back over all of the time that I've spent in that school and community, is that story building and showing me and telling me a set of patterns and trends that show me overcoming difficulties, working with relationship with others in terms of being able to go forward towards my desired destination? Because if I've got a story that when I retell it from the past is one of overcoming, one of dealing with difficulties and struggles, I'm most likely to think that my future is one that's going to be positive, that yes, it will have difficulties and struggles in the future, but because I know my story and I know where I've overcome that in the past, I'm more likely to see that my future story is going to be one that's positive also. In looking at a school then, the Relational Schools Foundation and Dr. Lowe's research started to look at schools then as being not just permanent entities, not something that was fixed in stone, but almost like a mixing desk, that we can look at those 5 elements within a school and start adjusting and working with those. In a school that doesn't communicate very often or doesn't have spaces for students to communicate, they can provide opportunities for them to communicate and interact and to speak, to know and to be known. And so in our mixing desk, we can actually then increase that proximity in terms of being able to provide opportunities for that. So if we were to evaluate our school and think that our students don't have the opportunity to communicate with staff or each other, then we can provide those opportunities, and so doing, lift that scale in terms of the community. As he went around, he decided then to have a look at each of the schools and work out throughout the United Kingdom which schools were doing this really well. And so the question for many people is, how do you actually measure a relationship? How do you measure the connections that are occurring within a school? What he was looking for was relational proximity. How much do we know or connect or interrelate to each other? And that was the basis upon which he was valuing or understanding the level of that connection. And it's an interesting tool where he was asking was, he paired people up in terms of the classrooms from all individual classes, gave them somebody within that class to think about. Maybe somebody they knew well, maybe somebody who was brand new to the school, maybe somebody they had known since they'd commenced even in prep or grade 1. And ask them questions about how well they knew this individual, what this person's values were, what they liked or disliked, how well did they know these things? Did they know what this person's aspirations were like? They were asking them to make a decision around, was their relationship in the past a good one, or was it a stressed one? now, was it a good one or a difficult one? And then in the future, in 10 or 15 years' time, did they expect to know the individual that they had been paired with randomly within that school group? And from that, he was able to judge how close or distant relationships were within that school. Now, that's not valuing the relationship. It's talking about a proximity. How close am I to understanding that person, to realising what their needs and wants are, understanding their values or projecting where they want to head in the future? And it gave him a huge amount of data. And the data looked like this. So those 5 domains I spoke about first off were divided then into 35 individual elements. So for each one of those 5, 7 subsets of questions could be asked. And going across each of those little wriggly lines that appear on the screens are different schools. And putting all the students' results together so that it was totally anonymous, and hundreds of children within the schools put their results together, and then to be able to evaluate where they were doing well or where they were struggling. This allowed him to develop a baseline to say, in an average school, how close should those connections be? How well should students know each other? How well should they have an understanding of their future aspirations of the students that they travelled with? The findings were very interesting. So in total, 3 of the findings that came out of his study were that girls actually had better relationships in general. And so he gave it about a 75% ranking. Came down to the fact that the girls actually spoke a great deal more. And when you looked at the amount of time that they communicated with each other in meaningful ways, that they were spending a lot more time communicating. In boys, they spent less time actually interacting and communicating. They may have spent time together, undertook activities, played sport, spent time in spatial proximity to each other. But in terms of communicating, being understood and understanding the other, that was reduced. But the fascinating part of this research was that all of these schools were co-educational and that they had boys and girls right the way through. And what the study found was that in terms of understanding the other within school environments, it was the male and female relationship that was the most disconnected. And on his results, it was about 32%. And when the researchers went in and dug a little bit deeper, the reason that was the case was the fact that the only way that male-female relationships were framed were around concepts of dating and marriage. So for a boy and a girl in a school to communicate with each other, the destination was either dating or somehow marriage. And so in that sense, schools had not set up the relationships or the behaviours or the expectations that boys and girls could actually be friends. And so accordingly, they didn't interact with each other, even though they sat next to each other in class, may have gone through school for 13, 15 years together, their understanding was still very limited. It's interesting because when we talk about private schools and we talk about single-sex schools, a boys' school or a girls' school, often the greatest complaint about them is that you send your child to a boys' school or a girls' school, they won't learn how to actually interact with the opposite sex. So here are people spending 13 years together and they're still not learning about that. One would think that if we were able to teach that and develop that in schools, how different would marriages actually be if people came out with even just the 75% between female and female as demonstrated there, how much different impact that would have. When you look at those results, there's one school that really stood out, and this was a school that actually surprised the researchers in their results, and it was called the Samuel Ward School. And you can see it there and doing some of the comparisons. Have a look at the first element that was there, and that was the amount of time that students were allowed or given opportunity to interact and connect with each other. Compare that to another school that's there in terms of just how different one element is, how often students have time to talk and interact, communicate, and get to know each other. That's not $1 million activity. That doesn't require a new facility. It doesn't require employing new staff. Simply being focused on the fact of whether or not you're giving opportunity for students to communicate had that profound impact. If you go all the way through, that same school, the Samuel Ward School, was exceptional all the way across. And you can see how far it was ahead all of the other schools in the United Kingdom. Now, they were fascinated by that school and they wanted to know what was different about this school compared to all the other schools that they had reviewed. And they were wanting to know whether a wealthy school, was it a school that was brand new, was it a school that was in a really old area and all the families knew each other, etc. And when they looked at the Samuel Ward School, what they actually found was that it was actually a school that was in quite a challenging area, a school that was from low economic background, and that the projection in terms of students' academic ability was quite low as well. But in terms of what the school had set up besides that community, or in spite of that community, was a school that was focused on culture of community, a school that was focused on relationship at all parts of how the school was developed. From the very start of the school and through all parts of its DNA, they wanted to develop a school that was built upon connection and provide opportunities for people to get to know each other and to be known. The results are that even the students who were the most challenged did well. So students who were good students already improved beyond what was expected, but the students who were the most marginalised, the most at risk of failure or dropping out, results increased exponentially. And what they found out that one of the key factors was that all students had a high level of literacy and communication. And in doing so, they were able to connect with others because they were able to understand and communicate, be communicated to, but they were also able to express and communicate to others things that were important about them, things that they were worried about, destinations and pursuits that were important to them as well. And because of that, they had a good sense of belonging, and that good sense of belonging ensured that their academics increased markedly. But we're in Australia. We're not the UK, we're not the Samuel Ward School. And so our question was to say, what is the transferability of these studies? So it's great that the Relational Schools Foundation did these studies in the UK with government schools. How would that come across into the Australian environment? And so we invited Dr. Rob Lowe to come out and actually speak to our schools. And part of that, we thought, wouldn't it be interesting if he brought his research tool with him? And our view has been, as a group of Christian schools and heading up those schools, 140 of them, we've always put forward that schools that shared the same ethos and values, and ours was a Christian set of ethos and values, that our view was that relationship was central to what we did, that we were communities of people coming together and rallying around that there should be some kind of profound impact. If relationship was central and his study said that that should make an impact, then our schools who are set up to do that, shouldn't there be some kind of correlation that was there? So we then took his findings and his research, and remember, I'm going to take you back, that's the Samuel Ward School's results. Take away everybody else, that's Samuel Ward. And when he came out to Australia, we asked Dr. Rob Lowe, we said, here's one of our schools at random that we're selecting for you. We would like you to take that research tool and all of that data and apply it to one of our Christian schools. And this was the result. The schools had nearly the identical results. Two schools on opposite side of the world, one's a government school, one's a Christian school. The thing that they have in common is their focus on connection, community, and relationship. And that's really profound. We're still yet to work out the statistical percentage of that, of how close that is in terms of 35 different points, and on that scale, just how close those results are. But isn't it amazing with two schools from very different backgrounds who focus on connection and relationship and the value of individuals, the impact that it has on the results that were there? Now, the question may be, well, where to from here? You've got one school and you've compared it to the rest, and I would agree with you. Any person who's involved with statistics or research would say that could have been a fluke. I agree with you. Having two schools that match up. But it does say to us, is there something here that we should be investigating? And to that end, we've just commissioned research over 20 Christian schools involving 8,000 students to find out whether or not when a community comes together, where they share the same ethos and values, where the whole focus upon relationship of about valuing and caring for individuals, does this hold true across an entire movement? And so those results have gone out, and I'm pleased to say that not only do we have about 8,000 participants, we have about close to 11,000 people who are now participating. Further than that, I want to take it one step further. So it would be good to say people gathered around the same ethos, the same value of connection would achieve these results. But two communities don't look the same. And in that part of our group, we realised that we've got some very different communities. So we said, what if we did then a case study of some of the more unique communities and thought, how does relationship or connection change with them? So one of them we've decided to do a specific case study on is an Indigenous community. How does an Indigenous school develop a relationship, have a sense of community and its values? We're looking at a multicultural community. We're looking at a very small community. We're looking at a rural community. And we're looking at a community that deals with the marginalised as well. And we want to know, does the power of connection, of having a shared set of values and a shared ethos, overcome all differences and still have that positive impact upon students? What are we hoping to find from that? I believe that we will find differences in our school. Yes, it's lovely to think that every one of the 140 schools in Christian Schools Australia would achieve the same as Samuel Ward. But what I think we will find is that there will be schools that will have slight differences. And when we look at that little mixing desk, there'll be some schools that do communication extremely well. There'll be other schools that students know their story and they score very highly, and others where it's not the case. And our hope is then to have a look at the schools that are doing extremely well and to take those little pieces of information, those little ideas or activities that they've got in their schools, and start applying it to those schools that are struggling in those areas. Because for the first time we can say, we value relationship, we know the connection has an impact, but we'll also know how you do it as well. And whether we get ideas from an Indigenous community, a rural community, a little school, or a city school, the ideas and the ways in which they build connection and community will be important. And at the end of all of this, my hope is this, is that wherever a student goes to school, then rather than just focusing on NAPLAN results or their final OP score or senior certificate result, that they'll actually realise that just as important, maybe even more important, are the connections they made with their fellow students, the connections they made with their teachers, the connections they made with the school. That they will realise that those connections give them an idea about who they are. And when they know who they are, when they know that they belong and have value, when they realise as well that they have a future that they can actually participate in and influence, that a student will have a greater sense of satisfaction in going to those schools, and schools will know how to facilitate that. And so my hope that is in a year's time, when all those results come back in, that we'll have a few clues to be able to get students to connect better with each other and their schools. Thank you.
Sensational. If we could all give another round of applause for Dr. Pampook. Yep. I'm sure that information has brought a lot of food for thought for our students, parents and educators in the room tonight. Our next speaker is a man devoted to setting society on their path to freedom. Mr. Simon Ives and his wife Kamini founded the charity Milk and Honey Projects in 2009. With the purpose of empowering middle to upper class Cambodians to use their influence and potential to help their own people. In 2016, Simon produced an internationally award-winning documentary about their work in Cambodia called Missions in the Wilderness, Milk and Honey Cambodia, if you plan on watching it. Simon is also the digital marketing specialist on a global team at CV, where he manages global marketing campaigns and supports and advises teams across Asia Pacific, Latin America, and Europe. CV is a Christian ministry with a strategic goal to reach 1 billion people with the gospel message using cutting-edge technology and media. Simon played a leading role in 2016 campaign Go Everywhere that's exposed nearly 1 million people worldwide with the gospel message of Jesus Christ. If you could all join me in welcoming Mr. Ives to the TEDx stage.
You know, I recently heard a story about somebody who works at an airport counter, and their job is to handle complaints from passengers who've missed their flights or whose flights have been delayed. And one day, sick of hearing constant abuse, they looked over at the wheelchairs that are used to assist passengers sometimes and decided to wheel one behind their counter and sit in it for a day just to see what would happen. And the angry abuse would soon trail off into politeness when people realised that they were speaking to someone in a wheelchair. And as far as I know, to this day, that person still sits in a wheelchair every day at work. You see, we like to categorise people, and we think and feel differently about those different categories. You know, it might be indifference or love or hate or fear or sympathy or empathy, but that's our natural behaviour. Now, when we think about ideas that change the world, we tend to think first of technology. We think of the wheel or electricity or the microchip, and these are absolutely ideas that have changed the world. But ultimately, these are tools, and it's how they're used that will make the biggest difference to the world around us. Let's look at what's broken in the world around us. We see injustice, we see inequality, we see violence and conflict, we see poverty. And all of these things are as a result of prejudice. And that's why I propose that the greatest challenge of our time is not actually better technology. I propose that the greatest challenge of our time is defeating prejudice in all its forms. Now, prejudice means basically to prejudge. It's to judge without evidence. And you wouldn't be a very good judge if you were to make a judgment without looking at the evidence. So a part of that, and what leads to prejudice, is ignorance. I know that you and I wouldn't make a big decision about something without looking at the facts first, would we? Well, let's look at a recent example. The question was asked, is the world getting better? Now, it's a simple, straightforward question. 3% of us, only 3% of us in Australia said yes. There's 4% in the UK, 6% in the US. Now, let's look at the data. So this is the worldwide trends from about 1980 to 2015 as a percentage of worldwide population of people in extreme poverty and people with access to basic education. Now, these graphs indicate that absolutely the world is getting better. And these are representative of several other areas as well, like famines, deaths by famines, the level of immunisation against infectious disease in developing countries, etc. The list goes on. The fact is that the world absolutely is getting better. Now, I watched 9/11 unfold on live TV, and it had a profound effect on me. And on that day, it changed the way that I thought and felt about Muslims. In America today, people's second greatest fear is of a terrorist attack. Now, we're going to look at some more data, but before I do, I just want to say that one person killed in a terrorist attack is one too many. Just like one person in extreme poverty or one person without access to basic education is one too many. So there's absolutely a lot of work for us to do. And the world absolutely needs ideas to change these things. But let's look at the data. So this is 46,000 dots on a page, and I've enlarged a portion of that just to give you a sense of scale. But in your lifetime in the United States, the chances of being killed in a refugee terrorist attack is not 1 in 46,000. It's 1 in 46 million. Now that would mean that there would need to be 1,000 of these pages to represent those odds. Now let's look at some other statistics as a point of reference in comparison to that. You are 6 times more likely to be killed by a shark in America than by a refugee terrorist attack. And I'd say if that guy's about to jump in the water, his chances are probably a lot higher again. You are 407,000 times more likely to be killed in a car accident. And if you drive a convertible, don't wear a seatbelt, your chance is probably much higher again. But let's look at the statement. Your second greatest fear is something that has a 1 in 46 million chance of happening in your lifetime. It seems crazy, doesn't it? 2 years after 9/11 happened, my wife and I went to Thailand and we taught Muslim uni students English for several months. And my perception and my category of Muslims was completely shattered because the people that I was spending time with were far more like me than like somebody capable of carrying out a terrorist attack. You see, in our popular culture, we have the evil villain, and they're one-dimensional, and you know, they're evil personified. It brings out the fanatic in us because we want justice to be done. We want nothing more than for them to be destroyed, and when they are, we cheer. And we're constantly getting this message through our TV shows and our movies. Just like we're constantly getting negative media that's telling us the world's getting worse. Those stats that we saw earlier about worldwide poverty and disease, things might be actually happening less but being reported more. And so we're constantly getting these messages through media, through news, that are colouring and affecting our perceptions. I grew up in a home without a TV. And while that made me the weird kid at school, I'm actually grateful now because it meant that I read a lot. And studies show that children that are exposed to reading, read to and read themselves, develop more empathy compared to children who watch lots of TV, who actually develop less. Neuroscientists would say that at a neurobiological level, reading about an experience causes the same brain activity, the same brain patterns to take place as when you're actually experiencing that situation in real life. The Egyptian writer and activist Ala al-Aswani, who also happens to be a Muslim, writes that a fanatic cannot love literature. Why? Because when you read a great novel and you're inside that character's head, you're no longer thinking about their nationality, you're not thinking about their race or their beliefs or the colour of their skin. You're only thinking about the human being. And so he argues that reading great novels absolutely can make us better human beings. So I'm going to propose a few things that we can do to explore ideas to change the world. And the first one is to question courageously. Now, why courageously? Because they're questions that might make us uncomfortable. They're questions that might make people around us uncomfortable. Because I think deep down we have a sense of what prejudices we already hold. So let's begin by asking courageous questions. Let's investigate courageously. We've already seen how a simple perception can be completely shattered by looking at the data, and we have more data at our fingertips than we ever have had before. So let's look at the data. What are our perceptions based on? What are our prejudices based on? What's the data say? Read courageously. And by that I mean don't just read books about people like you and by people like you, but find autobiographies by people who think differently to you, who believe differently to you, who are in a different environment to you that will challenge your thinking. And finally, and this is the most important thing that I want to say today, and that's listen courageously. Now, it wasn't until we actually went and spent time with Muslim people and heard their stories that our perceptions were changed. But I want to give you another example. This is Chanti, and he took us to a remote part of Cambodia to show us temples that tourists usually never get to see. And when we were there, he noticed on the ground something, and he picked it up, and it was a mortar shell. It's like a propelled grenade. And he told us a story. He said that when he was a small boy, him and a friend of his were playing in a field not unlike this one, and they noticed one of these on the ground, and not knowing what it was, he leant down and picked it up, and they began to play catch with it. He threw it to his friend, and his friend threw it back to him, and he threw it to his friend, and it hit the ground, and it exploded, and it killed him. Now, I'd questioned why Cambodia is the way it is today. I'd looked at the data, I knew the statistics, I knew the history, I knew the conflict. I'd even read some powerful autobiographies of survivors who'd been through the genocide. But nothing hit me like that moment. Erin Morgenstern talks about telling a tale that takes up residence in your soul, that becomes your blood and purpose. And who knows what you might do because of that tale. It becomes your gift to give to the world. And see, when Chanti told me that story, it took up residence in my soul, just like many other stories that I heard face to face from Cambodian people. You see, I just saw myself with a young friend of mine as a young boy walking in a field and finding something on the ground, and I saw myself reach down and pick it up and throw it to my friend. And it suddenly got really real for me. It's stories like these. See, there's prejudices that cause that grenade to be sitting there in that field, and there's prejudices that exist today around the world that cause this same kind of scenario to play out. It's hearing stories like Shanti's and many other stories from Cambodians that inspired my wife and I to start an organisation in Cambodia called Milk and Honey that works to empower Cambodians to make a difference in their own country. So can a story really defeat prejudice? Well, let's look at a really challenging example. This is the Israeli-Palestinian border, and this is a young Palestinian boy, and he's looking at an Israeli soldier. Now, for many boys his age, the only Israeli they might have ever seen would be a soldier. And this has been called the intractable conflict. Lots of people have tried to bring peace to this conflict that's raged on for over 100 years. Many lives have been lost, and there's been no peace. One day, a young Israeli woman named Natalia picked up the phone to call a Jewish friend of hers, and she accidentally dialed the wrong number, and a Palestinian man answered the phone. Now, instead of just hanging up straight away, she decided to listen courageously, and she had a conversation with him. He told her how their food that they had access to was rotting, and how he was concerned about his pregnant wife, that he wouldn't be able to get her to a hospital to give birth. And as a result of that conversation, that young woman started an organisation called the Parents Circle. And I love that name because what better reason is there for us to defeat prejudice than for the world that our children will inherit? They started an initiative called the Hello Peace phone line. And basically a Palestinian person could call an Israeli person for 30 minutes for free or vice versa. And in the first 5 years of opening that phone line, but there were many long and lasting friendships that were made between Israelis and Palestinians as a result. There's a young boy named Ali, a young Palestinian boy, and he has diabetes. Probably not unlike a boy that we see pictured. One of those conversations were between his parents and an Israeli family. And that Israeli family now brings life-saving insulin to the border regularly for Ali. So ask Ali, can a story really defeat prejudice? Can a story really change the world? And so there's stories there to be told. And so my challenge to you today is not to go looking for ideas to change the world. Go looking for stories, and the ideas will come. There's a time to look at the data, to question, to investigate, to read. But then let's turn off our devices, let's turn off the news, turn off our TVs, close our books, and go across the street or go across the world and get face to face with people who are unlike us. Listen to their stories. And as those stories are told, you then have a responsibility to tell them to the world. And when you do, you put yourself into those stories and you make them available to a whole new audience. There's nothing more powerful than a story told face to face like we're learning today. Brené Brown said, if we deny our stories, they define us. But if we own our stories, we get to write a brave new ending. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Ives. We are inspired and excited about what he has just proposed. Now we're going to hear and enjoy a harp solo from the talented Madeline Ralston. Please enjoy.
Thank you, Madeline. Our next speaker is a woman who is at the cutting edge of resilience research, Dr. Paula Barrett. She is a scholar, researcher in the field of child psychology. She has been published widely in the area of prevention and treatments for those with anxiety and depression, and the promotion of resilience through her evidence-based program, Friends. You can find this at www.friendsresilience.org. For over 2 decades, Paula Barrett has authored and evaluated the well-known Friends program. She is conducted by the World Health Organization. Dr. Paula Barrett has received the highly commended certificate in the Human Rights Medal of the Australian Human Rights Commission for her contribution to the well-known being of children, the youth, and the wider community. She has been recognised amongst the top 1% for her publishing within the field of psychology and psychiatry at an international level. Please join me in welcoming her to the stage.
Like this.
So one of the strategies that we learned from Dr. Paula Barrett's program is to have a bucket where we focus on acknowledging the positive things that Isabel does during the week. So we found that really beneficial, haven't we, at home? We're rewarding on the spot. We spend a lot of time probably in the past picking up things that they do wrong and not enough time focusing on what they do right. So this has really got us.
Yeah, absolutely, focusing on the positives and also time out, you know, taking time out when you are stressed or things aren't going well for you at that point in time. The breathing techniques have been an amazing thing just for us to focus on as a family, and it's worked from everyone from our 4-year-old up to Amy and I, so it's proven. It's been amazing, and it's a wonderful journey to be on, to be honest. It's turning our life around, helping us conquer
our own internal, I guess, fears and understanding our feelings a bit better as well, so that we can help, I guess, apply that at home and help Isabel make it easier that she's not learning just herself. We're doing it as a family, we're learning as we go.
I feel strong inside when I have quiet time and do slow breathing. I feel confident when I make a step plan to face fear, so like talking in front of an audience on my own.
Dr. Barrett's course that Izzy's just completed has been a huge help for us, and probably one of the key points that we have found really helpful is her understanding that all emotions are okay. So being happy is okay, being sad is okay, being angry is okay, being frustrated is okay, and what she does with those emotions once she feels them is the most important thing. And for us at home, that's been a huge helping point for dealing with difficult situations and making really positive choices forward. And I just hope going into next year, and as she grows as a young girl and into an adult, she can continue to build her resilience and her emotional capacity so she is a really healthy and happy adult when she's older.
I have made a little step plan because I was sleeping on my own bed because I'm quite scared of doing that alone. My step 1 would be going to bed with a family member like your mum or dad or brother and sister. Number 2 is going to bed alone when the light is turned on. Number 3 is going to bed with the light off for about half the night. 4 is going to bed with the light off in something that makes you feel safe. 5 is being able to sleep in my own bed.
I am happy I can introduce Dr. Paula Barrett to you. Paula teaches kids how to be brave, confident and resilient. I feel strong in myself when I think helpful thoughts. I can try my best. I don't have to be perfect. This helps me think of my role model. Who is my dad?
I'm so happy to see that Alexander's so confident and more confident than when I was a kid, and I'm pretty sure this is thanks to Fun Friends Resilience program.
Hello everyone. Thank you for having me here, and I want to thank first the original custodians of this land and all the schools worldwide that use our Friends programs that were developed in Queensland. and my family and the friends, staff, all the staff that work with me to make our work possible. So I'm going to talk to you about prevalence. My work started in 1986 when I came to Australia with a scholarship to do research for a PhD. And we know that in most countries, 1 in every 5 people experience severe anxiety or depression throughout their lifetime. The high-risk times are transition into adolescence, hormonal changes, having a child, menopause, or retirement. Those are high-risk times. But all throughout life, most families have at least one person that has experienced severe anxiety and depression. So it's not a stigma because it happens to 20 to 25% of the population. So we know that so many children and so many adolescents, so many adults experience anxiety and depression. However, when we look at who seeks help, only 3 in every 100 people in average, so 70, many people go throughout life without ever talking about it or seeking help or developing skills to be able to cope. So knowing that about 20 years ago, there was an investment in looking for prevention. What can we do to prevent the onset of anxiety and depression? What can we do for people, for children, for families to prevent this? And there were some allocation of funds towards developing research projects in schools, because the idea was if children and adolescents and adults don't come to us, we can go to them. We can go to schools and give children skills to help them become resilient and strong in the face of adversity and be able to cope in positive ways. And not just in schools, but also go to the workforce and go to other organizations where adults are dealing with difficulties and being able to develop coping skills. So there's another very powerful idea developed by James Ackerman, who won the Nobel Prize of Economy in the year 2000. So this gentleman was not a psychiatrist, not a psychologist, not an education researcher. He was a specialist in economy, and he looked at the power. He was very interested in what governments can do in terms of the investment of giving children from a very young age social emotional skills. In this way, my talk is very connected with the previous talk. That the importance of connection, of social relationships, of emotional intelligence, and being able to give children and their teachers and their families social emotional skills. And he showed that implementing these programs in the school curriculum was one of the best investments that the government could do. We also know from many research studies that are present up there that giving children social emotional skills has got a very significant impact on academic outcomes, on reducing bullying in schools, on social relationships within the school environment, and also in terms of their ability to believe in themselves and to be able to make wise choices, career choices, or just pure relationships with their family, with their teachers, with their schools. The World Health Organization has repeatedly said in numerous conferences that the highest risk issues in Western society are obesity, type 2 diabetes, lifestyle diabetes, anxiety and depression. And these are going to be the greatest source of expense for governments in the next 50 years. So if we know these, it's our ethical obligation to try to address what we know it's going to be growing in our communities. And my area, my passion is to treat and prevent anxiety and depression, and also to promote resilience in school communities, in children and families and adults. I'm very proud to say that a few years ago, Corrective Services in Queensland has implemented our adult resilience program in all the jails in Queensland. And more importantly, that the inmates love doing the program. They love receiving those skills, and they're very enthusiastic and positive and welcome learning those skills because it's phrased in the positive. What can we do to give you power and to give you skills so to improve your life rather than what's wrong and what's missing? We go and approach it from a positive way, giving resilience to people. Okay, so what is resilience? This word is very, very popular, and it's very trendy to talk about resilience. In the Oxford Dictionary, they say it's the ability to overcome adversity in a positive way. But I've always thought that it's also the ability to become strong by embracing change and by being able to face new challenges and opportunities. Both things, overcome adversity, but also have the strength, the inner strength to embrace change and to embrace opportunities. That's also being resilient. Nelson Mandela said, we never lose. We either we win or we learn. That's a very powerful statement. Okay, so what do we teach children in these social and emotional resilience programs? We teach them about feelings, that all feelings are okay, and that we can communicate about our feelings. And we also teach them about empathy training, the ability to feel what other people are feeling, and other living beings are feeling, because we all feel the same way. And what can we do if we put ourselves in their place? What can we do to help them feel better? What can we do to help? Then we also teach them relaxation techniques and breathing techniques that all sports athletes learn. And they're very brief and they work, like doing deep breathing, relaxing your muscles, etc. We teach them how to change their thinking, because everyone has negative thinking sometimes and helpful thoughts, and how to change those unhelpful thoughts into helpful thoughts, into powerful thoughts. We teach them how to face challenges in small steps so they feel strong to proceed and to get to the end result, to break challenges into small steps and face them rather than avoid them. We teach them how to reward themselves, and when we hear about rewards, we always imagine material rewards and things that you can buy, but we really focus on interpersonal rewards, spending time with people that are very valuable to you and that you have fun with, and having shared experiences. It doesn't need to be an extraordinary event like going overseas, but it can just be sharing a meal together, or playing a game together, or planting a plant together. Everyone has different interests, but sharing time together, giving other people time, doing something they love is a very powerful reward. And we also teach them to practice. Resilience is a language. It's like learning English or learning Japanese. The more we practice, the better we become at it. The same thing with practicing music. So the more you practice resilience skills in your life, in your school community, in your home, the stronger you're going to be when you need to face new challenges or adversity. And also, we teach children and adults and teachers how to think about values-based role models. We really talk about values, identifying what's important in their lives, and thinking about role models that emulate those values, and also surrounding themselves with support networks like in the school community or in the family, extended family, people that can support them in what they're trying to achieve. Okay, so we show them the importance of body clues, becoming friends with your body, the importance of mindfulness and being present and paying attention with your 5 senses. We teach children, younger children, the idea of helpful thoughts, the idea of being brave, looking people in the eye, the idea of empathizing with all living beings in our environment, because we're all interconnected, we all feel the same thing. And we also teach children, on the right-hand side you can see the skills we teach adolescents, which are more complex in nature. Our programs will go across the lifespan from preschool to adulthood. And we can also teach children how to make choices, thumbs-up choices or thumbs-down choices. So if you're feeling very angry, that's okay. It's okay to feel angry. You're feeling really sad, that's okay. Everyone feels sad sometimes. But can you make a thumbs-up choice or thumbs-down choice? And children really understand and connect with those ideas. So education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And we know that we can educate people to prevent anxiety and depression and to promote resilience. These are skills that people can learn to improve their lives and to improve the life of their school community. Okay, this slide shows that the interaction between risk factors and protective factors explains everyone's emotional development and your development through life. So risk factors, these risk factors and protective factors are established by research meta-analytic studies. So they're not my choice, they're established through research. So at the moment, 2017, we know the major risk factors for emotional development are physiological sensitivity at birth, and we know that 1 in every 5 children, independent of socioeconomic status, gender, race, ethnicity, 1 in every 5 children are born more sensitive than others through heart rate, sweat index, pupil dilation, etc. We also know that at certain periods in life, in development, children and adults are more at risk, specific points in life. And we know that life events that are traumatic can be a risk factor for throughout development. But the protective factors, as you can see, is a much longer list, which is very positive. There's lots of things we can do to protect people from becoming very emotionally distressed. So the first one and most important is attachment, being able to develop and maintain stable attachment, positive relationships, starting at birth with parents or with grandparents or with carers, and going throughout life with your peers at school, with your teachers. Stable attachments are our strongest protective factor. Followed by what we call now mindfulness, being able to pay attention with our 5 senses and being fully there in very powerful, beautiful moments when you eat. Really enjoy, look at the color of the food, the taste, the smell. When you're in nature, look at the color of the trees. Being able to pay attention without judgment and being fully there in a mindful way is a very powerful protective factor. The third one, we all know that people that think in positive ways and can change their negative thinking into positive thinking, it's a very strong protective factor. Being able to stay a positive thinking throughout life, it's very powerful in terms of your emotional well-being. Then being able to have values-based role models and support networks, which in the school community, of course, can develop that, and we all know that schools are very powerful, protective environments for children and for the teachers that work in them, if we can hold these ideal values and having your role models, your support networks in that school or in that school community with parents and other families. Health factors, we've known since the Greek times that the way your mental health is related to your physical health. We know that sleep is extremely important, and we're sleeping less and less because of technology in bedrooms, and the invention of the electric light prolonged the day. So sleep is extremely important for health. Staying active, and staying active is not necessarily being just sporty and loving to run and everything. That's fantastic, but some people are not sporty, but it's very important to stay active and to stay active for at least an hour a day. So walk to school, bicycle ride, garden, dance, but staying physically active is extremely important. And of course, what we eat is extremely important. And what we know at the moment is that reducing sugar, and especially processed sugars, which are in almost every single thing you buy these days, is extremely important for your health. And also choosing a plant-based diet is very important for your health. And there's a lot of research. If you can go to our website, and where you can find scientific articles about health and eating. So I notice I avoid the word diet, because diet is associated with food restriction. And it's not about food restriction, it's about food choice. Prevention programs have been proved for more than 30 years now that they can promote mental health and emotional well-being. There's beyond doubt the countries that really have implemented this statewide in all the schools and countrywide in all the schools are Ireland, Canada, and New Zealand, where all children do social emotional programs as part of the curriculum, the school curriculum. And we can see gradually what the results are in terms of how this have a positive impact on the academic outcomes and the school relationships, the reduction of bullying in schools, etc. Of course, giving back to the community is very powerful, because that's the time children and adults learn that it's not just about what can my family give me, what can my school give me, what can my country give me, but the reverse. What can I give to my family? What can I give to my community? What can I give to my country? And in every community, there's many opportunities for giving back and participating, giving your time, doing charity work, I don't know, elderly people, people in hospital, animal welfare, in the environment, go in clean places, plant trees, etc. The Nordic countries have got giving back to the community as part of the school curriculum from grade 1 to grade 12. So every Friday they have to participate for a couple of hours in community-based projects. And what they found is that the level of self-esteem and the level of self-confidence and also the ability to make choices about their own careers when they grow up has really showed a dramatic change since the children start participating not just once a year but on a weekly basis in community-based activities. So I just would like to point out to you that we are at the point of paradigm changes in my area, which is destigmatizing mental health and mental illness and changing the statistics in Australia, which are very high for depression and suicide, especially in a young population. We've had many paradigm changes in the history of humanity, and I'll just mention a few. So the idea that the Earth, the whole solar system is around the Earth, and then people challenging that, like Da Vinci and Bruno, and saying, no, there's many solar systems, and the Earth is just one little planet that goes around the sun. And for that, many people lost their lives, but there was a massive paradigm shift. Another paradigm shift, the idea that if you're born with a different color skin, you have the right to abuse and use other people with a different color skin, and that the racism issue. And there was a massive paradigm shift. The United States went to war for many years over that paradigm shift, but now it would be absurd to think that someone else is worth less because they're born with a different color skin. There was a massive paradigm shift. A very recent paradigm shift, which sounds like a joke, but you can go and look at the history, which is that women can't think straight, therefore they can't vote. And in 1976 was the first time in Switzerland that women could vote. But in New Zealand it happened much earlier. But now, of course, all women and men can vote. There was sexism, of course. There was a massive paradigm shift that all of us can vote, whether we're born male or female. But that sounds absurd to you because you can't imagine someone sitting next to you not being able to vote because they're female. But that occurred very recently. And we have to have a paradigm shift in my area of interest, which is mental health, physical health. We're talking about the same thing. Everyone experiences emotional distress. And we should be able to talk about it, support people, recognize that many people experience anxiety and depression, and being able to support them and not feel stigmatized as a family or as an individual, as a child, if they experience those feelings. Because guess what? We can help. They can learn skills that are going to make them feel resilient and cope better. Another paradigm shift, which is a great passion of mine, so I have to mention it, even if it's, like the previous speaker said, speak boldly. We have to have a massive paradigm shift about our environment and the way we treat other species. Speciesism, though we cannot continue doing what we do to other species because it's unjust, it's unjustified, and it's ruining our environment as well. It's all interconnected. So Confucius, 500 years before Christ, said our greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time we fall. Very powerful statement and emulates what I'm trying to talk about, which is giving people resilience. Focus on positive skills we can give children and adults all throughout the lifespan so that they can cope better. And I just wanted to say thank you And I hope I would inspire you to promote communication in your schools and know that there are many skills people can learn, not rocket science, it's very simple skills that can be taught and can be implemented in schools and work environments, corporate environments, government environments, for people to be able to become stronger and resilient and cope better with adversity, but also be able to embrace opportunities that come their way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barrett. This is truly food for thought. With that said, it is now time for our intermission. There are a few arrangements that we would like to let you know about. Toilet facilities are outside the theatre door just to the right, and there are more on the other side of the undercover area. Please join us for some refreshments during our intermission in the foyer area just outside. There will be some tables at the entrance to the theatre to create more space. Please be back and seated in 20 minutes so that we can finish in time. A bell will ring 5 minutes before we recommence. Please make your way back then. Thank you and enjoy the short break. Where? Oh, the home ec area? All right. The refreshments, oh, it's turned off. People